Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, what a brilliant conference so far, hey? Who's loving the lead LC18 conference? This morning was brilliant, wasn't it? I loved how so much content was packed into such a short amount of time, so I'm really enjoying this. And great today to be sharing on social media. I'm assuming everyone is in the right session? Because if you're not, we have to lock the doors. You're not allowed to go to any of the other ones. But so many people have come here today, so I'm assuming that you've come because you're interested in learning how to engage maybe your organization or your church or your ministry or your business in some effective social media communication. So I hope I can help today by bringing some really practical things about how to improve maybe some social media engagement. Is that okay? Good. My wife is here, Emma. Everyone say hi to Emma. Hi. And we have a 1-year-old baby now as well, just last year, and his name is Henry, and he's the most Malaysian blonde baby you can ever imagine. And it's weird, me and Emma, we feel way more at home in Malaysia now than we do in the UK. It's just become a home to us. So I like to think that if you could chop me in half, even though I'm a white European on the outside, on the inside, I would be fully Malaysian, lah. Okay, lah. Because some people from our church down the road, they're like Malaysian on the outside, but they go overseas to study, maybe in Australia, and they come back, they say that they're Malaysian on the outside, but they're European or Western on the inside, so they call themselves bananas, like yellow on the outside, white on the inside. So I'm the opposite. They call me the egg. I'm white on the outside, but I'm Asian on the inside. Yes, I love it that way. So let's have some show of hands then. Who's managing a social media account for their organization today? Could you lift your hand nice and high and show us who's managing? So maybe a church or a ministry. Okay, so a lot of people. And who's just managing their own personal social media account? You want to know how to maybe make that a bit more effective. I'm assuming there's pretty much everyone in the room, right? Okay, let's have favorite social media channel. Hands up for Facebook. Favorite, spend most time on Facebook. Hands down, hands up for Twitter. Hands up. Yeah, someone likes writing down here. Amazing. Hands up for Instagram. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I heard just now down here, these guys from India are using WhatsApp stories to be able to communicate things as well. So there's some other stuff out there as well that we may not even be using, but I'm assuming most people today are using things like Instagram to try and engage with people around. A little bit about my story. Maybe this is where I can use this clicker. Is that all right? Click. Where do I click? There we go. So we started a church a couple of years ago, just down the road in a place called Bangsar in Kuala Lumpur. And myself and Emma, we moved across here to start that church, and we were reaching out to young people. Now, in the UK, when you start a location of a church, you do a lot of things that we like to call advertising and marketing, and most of the time, you do that with print media. So you may typically make up some posters and some flyers, and you cram on there all of your information, your logo, your dates, your start time, your launch events, and you put it on a piece of print media, and then you flyer it out to the city like this. Of course, when we came to KL, there's a lot of different restrictions here that don't enable you to do that as a church. So we were forced into really using social media as our primary way to communicate what we wanted to do through our church here. So we kind of learned some lessons through our time kind of planting this church and reaching out to young people that I want to share with you today. 7 different lessons on how to make your social media communication more effective. Now, just to contrast the two for a second, print media and let's just say social media, part of digital marketing. One of the obvious benefits to social media is that it's really affordable. First of all, if you want to tell your boss, this is why we should use social media, or your pastor, this is why we should do it, it's probably way more affordable than it is doing the same thing through flyers and print media. Another reason is that it's searchable. Many people are able to simply go online, and within a couple of seconds, you could do it right now, you'd be able to find our church, you'd be able to find your neighbor's church, you'd be able to find a different ministry around within a couple of seconds, because you can search things, and you can't really do that in the same way with print media. Social media is where your customers are, especially if you're trying to reach young people, and assume by the Instagram hands up in the room, many people are trying to reach kind of an 18 to 29 bracket age group with social media. This is where your customers are. That's where the majority of people are. They're looking for things. People even now are going to places like Instagram and Facebook instead of going to a website. And more research has shown us that people don't Google things as the first point of call now. They may go to Instagram or even a Facebook account to try and find where to go on holiday. Last week, me and Emma were talking about where we're going to go on holiday next year. And I immediately went to Instagram and I typed in Philippines. Any Filipinos here? Yay! And I was having a look at all the Filipino islands. And the amazing thing about looking through Instagram for Philippines is you can see real-life pictures of the Philippines through an authentic camera lens. And a lot of people love that nowadays, seeing authenticity through social media. It's a great way for people to be able to see it. So you want to make sure that your presence on social media is right there at the front of people's minds, easy for people to search it. Another major benefit of social media and digital marketing is that it is measurable. And we talked about that a lot this morning in Jeevan's session, remember, where we're talking about how to measure the things that actually work and are effective. You can see through digital marketing the return that you have on the investment that you're putting in. You're able to measure engagement, likes, and comments. You're able to follow that through to visitors or website clicks or a whole different range of things. And lastly, it allows for interaction. You're actually able to build a relationship with people through social media. So I know you guys know that already. There's a heap of reasons why digital marketing, I think, is a massive key for the future of all our organizations. And in my opinion, I don't think it's optional. I think you know that too. That's the reason you're here. We all know we have to get up to speed with social media to connect with people in our generation. And so today, I hope I can just give you some keys, not on why to do social media, but how to make your social media more effective. They did a study in America recently. 80% of small businesses in America have an Instagram account. 80% of small businesses. So that's a massive proportion. However, 70%, they reckon, of Instagram posts in America are not getting seen by more than 20 people. So that means 70% of America's Instagram posts are actually non-effective posts. They're not being engaged or shared or commented or liked. So it's not just that we should do social media. We need really effective ways to be able to reach the people on the other side of our technology and make sure that we can connect with them. So let's talk about how to do social media effectively. Here's lesson number one. I think I accidentally went through it a second ago. Define your audience. This is a great place to start any kind of marketing. First of all, we start off with this idea of defining the audience. Defining who it is that you're trying to communicate to on the other side of your social media. I met some friends from China recently. I probably got some people around, maybe from China. And if you were to speak to me in Mandarin, I wouldn't have a clue what you're saying. I'm really sorry, but I haven't learned much Chinese in my life. I'm still trying to pick up the basics. So communicating to me in the wrong language is really not going to work. All you're going to get back from me is a blank expression. But if you communicate to me in English, we'll be able to have a conversation. And of course, that's a really simple way of describing a language that we use in design. We need to be communicating to people in the language that they can understand. But you can actually take this one step further, and you can talk not just about the language, but say the English language. We don't just have English, we have about 25 different accents or dialects that are all different around the country. Who has met Dr. James, the SPTC? Yeah, you met him? I went to his session yesterday, and what I loved about Dr. James is he's got this northern accent from England. It sounds a little bit like this. Hello, mate. Happy birthday. Is it your birthday today? And I was actually from the north of England when I was a kid, so I heard this accent, this dialect being spoken, and it immediately drew me in because I can understand the dialect that he's using. Now, obviously, two dialects, you can still kind of understand what someone else is saying. Maybe someone from Liverpool speaks to someone from the north of England or someone from the south of England. You still be able to understand it, but when someone speaks in the dialect, the same dialect as you, the same accent as you really be able to have an effective communication. There's a clarity of communication that happens over that. You can hear everything that the person's trying to communicate. And the same with marketing, visual marketing, fonts, colors, images. We don't just want to be communicating in the right language to people, but we want to bring them a visual experience that connects with them in a really deep way. And that's a little bit what we're talking about when we're talking about defining your audience, actually thinking really carefully about who it is that you're trying to communicate to. It's okay to limit your message through social media to a very specific group of people. Now, if you're leading your social media account for your organization, you may have already done some work for this, defining the audience who's on the other side. But perhaps you're running your own social media account. I want you to also think about this personally. Who is it that you have the greatest sense of engagement with? Is there a certain age group or a nationality or a profession that people on the other side of your social media will engage with because they're similar to you? They understand the accent that you're speaking in. When you think about two companies, say Apple and Microsoft, they actually have a very similar field, technology. I grew up watching Apple adverts next to Microsoft adverts, and you could tell that one of them is trying to communicate to more of a business world, and one of them is trying to communicate to the young students who want to look cool with their MacBook. And you can feel that even though we're in the same zone of technology, they're communicating to two very different groups of people. Last week I met a couple of weeks ago, I met someone who's working with celebrity fitness in Malaysia. And celebrity fitness is actually under the same umbrella as another company called Fitness First. And it's the same company that offers gym memberships to different people. But both of those different companies are actually speaking to a different type of person. One perhaps is more to do with image and looking healthy. The other one's to do with fitness and the way that people eat and trying to change people's dietary habits. So one company is actually communicating with two different faces to two different groups of people. So it's really important for us to consider the demographic profile of who it is we're trying to communicate to through our social media. You want to put yourselves into the shoes of the people who are on the other side of the screen from you. So let's have a look at this next slide here. This is an example of a Starbucks Instagram feed. I pulled these pictures from it just a couple of months ago. Look at these three pictures here and tell me from these three Instagram photos that Starbucks have put up, who do you think it is that they're trying to communicate to? Feel free to shout it out, I don't mind. We're all friends here. People who smile, that is true. But it's not just what I was going for, though. I was going a little bit. I think it's quite clear that these are perhaps 19 to 29-year-olds, Malaysians, again, happy people. It's very clear that they know exactly who they're trying to communicate to. But if you go into any Starbucks, you don't see just these kind of people there. There's all sorts of people. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to communicate to a very specific group of people. And through doing that, I guess they're not just reflecting the current use of their business, but they're actually projecting, saying one day, these are the kind of people we'd like to have engaging with our organization. So you can see they've very clearly defined it. Let's just ask a couple of questions then. Focus a message on a defined audience. You could write these down maybe now. Just use this as a bit of a workshop opportunity for your social media. Why don't you try and write down a bit of a profile of who it is you're trying to communicate to? And you can start off with the simplest of questions. Age, gender, personal interests. This is a great way to actually create content. The fourth one, who do they follow on social media? What kind of content do these people who I'm trying to communicate to engage with and share? This is going to give you just a very simple outline of the kind of person you're trying to communicate to. Couples, youth, creatives, maybe you're trying to communicate to parents specifically, maybe your organization's trying to communicate to church leaders or church pastors. All of these people are going to have a very different way of understanding your message, so you want to drill it down as tightly as possible. We can move on a little bit further than this. There's a term many of you would have heard before in marketing called pain points. And the whole idea of a pain point is that a person is motivated to find a solution to their pain, which sounds horrible, doesn't it? It's really not nice. But every single day we're walking around with unanswered questions and burdens and problems in our life, and we're looking for solutions. And people who are marketing content, they know how to bring solutions to the questions that people are asking. If you're just kind of barking promotions to a whole group of people, perhaps it won't be understood. But in the middle of the day, if you're dealing with anxiety and an inspirational quote pops up, about how Jesus stills the waves and the storms. It's going to capture your attention, and you're going to engage with that media. So you can start to ask yourself, what are the pain points of those people who I'm trying to communicate to? You notice even in the New Testament, Paul is speaking with different imagery and different metaphors to different types of people from different backgrounds. I think it's just a way that we communicate through culture. We have to change the way we communicate depending on who we're trying to talk to. A good way to ask yourself, what are the pressures that these people are under? So, for example, youth ministry. What are the people, the youth that you're trying to communicate to? What are the specific pressures that they feel that nobody else does? If you're trying to communicate to parents, the crying babies, we know a lot about that in the last couple of months. Pastors, different people. I'll give you an example actually from pastors myself. These are some of the things that I believe, like pastors and church leaders. I know this well because we run a church. Time. Never seems to be enough time for a pastor. It's a unique pressure. Volunteers, how to get more volunteers, how to activate volunteers, how to create systems in our church, how to deal with discouragement when pastors and church leaders are feeling alone and lacking friends, how to improve growth in our church. On the other hand, you might be trying to communicate to school teachers, and school teachers have very different pain points to pastors. School teachers might be thinking about reporting, or changes to curriculum, or workloads, or how to incorporate technology into the classroom. So defining your audience's pain points then helps you very specifically communicate your solutions to their problems. So perhaps before I ask a couple of you today, maybe you could share with us today who your social media account is trying to engage with, just so we can have some examples. I think it'd be a really helpful thing in the room. Let me just give you one example from our church in KL here. When we first started the church here in KL, we noticed that, I'm sorry if it is your cousin, because she's not bored, backslidden, and she's not a person who's carrying baggage, but I'll explain. When we first came to KL, we noticed that we felt called by God to reach a group of young adults. The same story kept coming through our church again and again. A millennial group of people. In general, they carried the same story. They were either bored in their faith, or they were backslidden from church, or they were carrying some kind of unresolved baggage that they came in with. So we just began to sit down and talk about, how God could use us to minister to these people. Obviously, millennials, if many of you would be trying to reach younger people as well through your organizations or your businesses. Reasons for not attending church. One study found 35% of millennials say that church is not personally relevant to them. 30% say that they can find God elsewhere outside of church community. 17%, a similar thing, they say that they can teach themselves whatever they need to know without church community. So we define them as the people who we're trying to reach, bored, backslidden, or people with baggage. And take that first one, for example, people who are bored. We found out that young adults, really, they're lacking purpose. They're stagnant, or they're stuck in their faith. They have a lack of community around them, where religion seems to have overtaken relationship. And so our answer, or our solution, that we could bring through our communication, not just on social media, but through our whole organization, was to inspire them that Christianity does not have to be a boring, dead religion. It's actually about a relationship with Jesus. We can inspire them that church can be a place that's full of life, that's transformational, that people can really meet a personal God. Secondly, backslidden, we found people who are dealing with condemnation, with doubts and questions, a feeling of rejection, have cut them off from community. And our answer for them was to reassure them that God is an embracing God, that God's grace and God's love could meet them when they came to church. If you've ever heard churches put out slogans to do with things like "come as you are," it's because they're trying to reassure people that condemnation and mistakes can't separate you from the love of God. So they're drawing people in who have maybe had those prodigal son moments. And lastly, with baggage, if people have got unresolved issues, they're skeptical, they've had bad experiences maybe about church before with finance or dealings with money or leadership. Generally, I think millennials tend to be a bit skeptical of authority anyway. So our answer for them as an organization was to build trust with them. Our solution to that pain point is to bring an authenticity about leadership, an authenticity about spiritual life, And so that filters down through everything we do, through all our communication, including social media. So I'm just going to skip back to, can I go back on this? I'm pressing the back button, but it doesn't go. Boop. Boop. Can you try this as a bit of an exercise? Maybe just take 30 seconds. Could you write down for us, and we'll ask for a couple of examples. Firstly, who is it that your social media account is trying to communicate to? And give us as much detail about that as possible. If it's a youth group, could you describe perhaps their nationality? Could you describe the age group specifically, the interests? And then maybe you could write down next to those a couple of the pain points that you think that group of people are experiencing in life. Hey, if it's parents, go ahead and do it for parents. If it's couples, go ahead and do that. If you're doing a personal Instagram account today, maybe talk about the kind of people you feel God's called you to reach, a message that God's given you to a certain group of people. It could be young people, it could be parents, it could be grandparents, those kind of things. So take a couple of seconds to do that, and then I'm going to ask for a couple of examples from around the room. We've got a microphone, haven't we, Aaron? Is that all right? Take a couple of seconds. You might have already done this before, and so in which case we'd love to hear from you as well about how you've done that. Okay. Great, and you can continue to write as we're hearing from some people. So earlier on, some people put their hands up, said they were doing social media for an organization. Are any of you happy to share? Could you put your hand up and say if you're happy to share who it is that you think your organization, through your social media account, is trying to communicate to? Would you be brave and put your hand up? There we go. Here's one. So tell us a little bit about who you're trying to communicate to through social media.
I'm a child and family development specialist. Wow, there's a lot of people. I'm just going to look at you. I'm a child and family development specialist, which means a big part of my audience is moms, young parents.
Yeah, great.
And so, and I specialize in toddlers. So young parents, people with just 1-year-old, 2-year-olds. You guys are my target audience.
We will follow you for sure. We need help.
Age group is usually, I do a lot of expat parents as well as local parents that went abroad to study and then they come back. And because what I do is respectful, mindful parenting. And so it's doing it without shaming, without bribing, without guilting, without hitting.
Wow.
So what I figured out was, this was so good. What questions are they asking is just how to do this mom thing without falling apart. What problems are they facing? Not enough time, not enough everything, not enough God. What solutions are they searching for? Just how to do it. How to be present without, how to still be you without, and still be a mom.
That's perfect.
What topics would they find relevant? Anything parenting, or like I didn't think about it until you said it, but it's like sometimes so many of the moms follow me and they ask me things like, where did you get that outfit from? Because that would work for me as a mom. And so I was like, oh, I could start posting that, like I shop here because they have pockets, and things like that.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Perfect example. So good. Can we have another example as well? Yeah, let's do a clap. Really good. Really specific. I love that. Let's have one more example.
Hi. Ninad from India. So we were running a massive project of outreach for the high schoolers and the teenagers, an age group of basically 13 to 21. And we run this program about 40 cities in our country. And one of the things that we came across is that this age group is particularly struggling with their identity problems. So the basic questions are about identity. The problems that they're facing is, every day when they wake up, they get into school. It's not about, the marks and things like that, but it's about what the other person is carrying, right from their bag to their phones to the kind of stuff that they wear. So there's a lot of peer pressure that they're going through on a daily basis. And because of that, the challenge, it results in things like, rejection. It results in things like, them getting addicted to a whole lot of substance abuse and relationship problems. The solutions that we found when they were looking for is actually a place of acceptance. Basically, I think Pastor covered it over here, that everybody is telling them what to do, but nobody is willing to accept them first. And that was a big challenge that they were facing. And so anything to do when it came to acceptance, they had their, their attention was all up there for when it came to these kids. So yeah, so that was a little bit of our findings when we were working for this project. Thank you.
It's brilliant, yeah, really helpful. So you might find that your social media account, you say, well, I'm trying to communicate to every age group, or perhaps you've got a number of programs underneath your umbrella that's for youth and for couples and for marriages and for something else. But probably within that, you do have a target audience still, because perhaps you're trying to reach, for example, church pastors with 5 or 6 different courses for all age groups. So then, in which case, you take the pastors or the leaders or the organization leaders as your target audience, and you communicate your products to those people using their pain points. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay, we're going to skip on from that. Feel free to do some more work on that. I think that would be a really helpful thing. We can move on. We'll move beyond that. This second lesson that we learned here quite quickly, I guess it's a real mindset shift between print marketing, traditional ways of marketing through leaflets and flyers, and digital marketing, where we bring content to people. And our aim with this should not really be to simply just promote events and conferences and products to people, but actually engage them with content. And you came up just now, you heard some amazing examples of some of the content that you could bring that really brings solutions to people. You got to understand that people don't follow you on social media because they want to be sold products. Even people who are following a church account, they don't really want to be bombarded every single day with an advert saying, this Sunday is going to be a great Sunday, come along, our service is at 11 a.m. Really, that's not their intention. Because you got to understand that social media is kind of an escape for a lot of people. It's a place where they can be entertained or inspired or motivated, or, just kind of relax and enjoy. You bring in social media at lunchtime. The first thing, often when people wake up, the first thing they do is look on social media. And so if you're always just promoting things to people, trying to sell products to people, you're probably going to quickly get an unfollow, or at least the likes and the comments and the engagement will go way down. So what we're trying to do is be generous. It's actually a key through social media, is a lot of the time we're giving out more than we're going to receive back. We're trying to bring, as someone mentioned today, valuable content into people's lives. People that maybe educates them or inspires them. We all follow some of those social media accounts that we just wish really didn't post so much, and at times we wanted to unfollow them. So use that as a bit of a warning sign for you. Hey, let's not be those people that are constantly promoting and barking promotions at people, but let's try and engage them. Content marketing is a technique of creating valuable and relevant content to people. We'll talk about consistency later on. But those two words there, valuable content and relevant content. We made content just now a lot more relevant to your target audience. We drilled down the audience that you're engaging with to a very specific group of people, an age, a occupation, or a nationality. The more relevant that you are, I guess the more effective you are. At the same time, you're also more alienating, because other people now are not really going to understand the language that you're communicating in. But that's okay, because you want to be as specific as possible. You're not here to reach everyone with your account. You're just here to reach a certain group of people. So you can ask yourself some questions. Will this content that I'm bringing to people, will it reach them? Would it be valuable to them? Would they want to read that? Parents are going to want to read very different content than youth. Perhaps you've got a product or a business you're trying to sell. There's a very specific group of people for that. Secondly, here's some examples of valuable content that I think we can bring. And let me just say that if you are in kind of a Christian organization or a church, I think that we are only just scratching the surface of what's possible through valuable content through social media. And here's a whole stack of ideas. And you'll see some accounts that you follow as well using some of these tricks, that they're not simply selling products to you every day, but they're resourcing you generously with a whole heap of things. Some examples, there's a account that I follow called BuzzFeed, and BuzzFeed does a lot of how-to tutorial videos. Yesterday, it was a how to bake a vanilla cake. And I really, after watching that, wanted to get my cooking out and pour the sugar and the flour in and bake a cake because it was just so engaging. And the more engaging content comes from that, I kind of interact with it, I like it, I comment it, I save it, I bookmark it. It's stuff that I'll come back to again and again. ABC News, as a news feed, started to do 360 experiences of some of the places that they were reporting on to try and bring a sense of interaction. A lot of people are using live video, Instagram Live, to try and engage people in real time. Taking Instagram Live, for example, into a concert, or last couple of weeks ago in Malaysia when we had the elections on, loads of Instagram Live accounts talking about the election, got so many, some of them 50, 60,000 people watching those Instagram Live videos. A lot of accounts as well are just using humorous content. They're just there to make us laugh. Silly memes and silly videos and cartoons and things. People love that kind of stuff, and it really engages with them. So while you're writing down some ideas, you could look at some other people who are, I guess, competitors, but they may just also be other people in your field doing a similar thing. Look at what they're doing. Try and modify and change their ideas. There's a lot of great content out there that you can take. Moving on from there, let's just keep moving through this. I guess another great key when it comes to social media is keep consistency. Because bad social media or bad images, bad content that's not valuable to people, that can hurt you as much as it can help you. An outdated presence on social media looks far worse than not having a social media account at all. If you've got a social media account and no one's posted on there since 2013, it really looks bad on you as a business. It projects a lot of things about you as an organization. So bad social media can hurt as much as it can help you. We don't just post for the sake of it. We try and post what we talked about this morning, both quality and frequency. It's exactly the same for social media. It is in so many different things. Your content's got to be quality content, but it's also got to be coming at people with the right frequency. Who in here is building a social media team? There's more than one person that manages your social media account. You know, maybe a designer, a poster, someone who writes. Yeah, there's a couple of people. You guys, big respect for all of you as well, because it's a really hard thing to do. And it's something we had to implement in our church, is to build a team of people who can work together to deliver consistently good content all the way through. Let me just give you a couple of ideas about how we went on to do that. This is a completely volunteer team as well. So these guys are not staffed. They're not getting paid for doing what they do. But this is kind of a workflow that we put together on how to deliver consistent and great quality content. Starts off right at the start, maybe with some kind of project that we want to launch something for a conference or an organization. We want to talk a new product. We get together and we talk about the vision and the concepts and campaign ideas. And then it would move on to a different team. These are kind of the designers. They're in blue. And the designers, their job is to put some visuals to it. Again, using the brief that you've come up with about who you're trying to reach, they can come up with kind of a creative direction, maybe a brand, colors. They can come up with some ideas for it. And while that's being worked out, different team can then come up with how we're going to strategically implement this over the next couple of weeks. Perhaps it takes a photography team to go away and do a shoot. Again, think about who you're trying to reach, the kind of people that you use in your photos, the kind of environments that you take those photos in. And then it can go to a completely different set of people who are going to do scheduling and posting. And if anyone's ever done scheduling and posting, you know that's the hardest job in the world. Administrating a social media account to keep on bringing it is often, it's easy to forget things like that. And that's often why we do use software as well to help us make use of things for social media. Here's a couple of examples. Recently, Instagram has allowed free software to post automatically on your behalf. So you no longer have the issue of waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning to get your post ready so that it can be there first thing in the morning for people. So there's a load of great software that you can use, and I'm sure most of you are already using software to help keep things on track. If you are an individual and you find that you're just not very good with social media, but you know that the people around you or your organization requires you to be better at social media, but you just keep forgetting to post, then you can also personally use some software to help you with that. Especially maybe you're a church leader or a pastor, you're busy doing a million things, but you know that people are following you and trying to interact with you. Then set up some reminders through some of this software to post you an image and remind you to post and invite people to something or tell people about something that's going on. I think you can also make use of this as an individual too. I work from a content plan. I think a plan of action is a real key, especially if you're trying to get something consistently coming out week by week. And it can be so simple. On the left is an example of just a Google sheet that we use at our church to keep everything organized. A number of businesses around the world that I've worked with do exactly the same thing. You'd be surprised. Some of the biggest churches around the world are simply using a Google sheet with some nice colors to keep everybody all on the same page. So it's really funny looking behind the scenes. Often it's not a lot of detail that's gone onto these things. It's very simple stuff that you can do yourself as well. So maybe different tabs along the bottom, different sheets. You could have different months there. And perhaps each color could be a different kind of post. Some of your posts, going back to valuable content, could be videos. Some of them could be promotions. Some of them could be how-tos, questionnaires. Some of them could be shout-outs about upcoming events. And on the right there, you can see an example of one of the softwares that we use to put some of that stuff together as well. Different platforms, you'll know this already, but different platforms have a very different aim, very different group of people. You can ask yourselves a couple of questions to help you work out which platform you want to use. Earlier on, we used, I heard that example of WhatsApp stories. I've never heard that before. Does anyone else do WhatsApp stories? It's just amazing, these guys. So that's a big thing in India, right? That everyone's on WhatsApp. Yeah, and you can just post a picture and everyone can see it. So hands up who's used Instagram stories before? Is that a big thing for a lot of people? Yeah, and Instagram stories, especially in 2018, are just flying through the roof. People love that. So that's an extra one onto the end of this, I guess, I haven't really talked about. Facebook has a very different audience to Twitter. Also, the tone of communication is very different between Twitter and perhaps Snapchat. I don't know if anyone still uses Snapchat. Anyone? Yeah, maybe 2 people or 3, a couple of people. I'd love to know if you are, because someone out there is still using it. YouTube as well, again, a very different way of communicating through. So you can ask yourselves a couple of questions just to help you make sure that you're actually on the right track and you're communicating in the right way. Here's just an example of a way that you can communicate one project through different social media channels. This is a devotional series, 12 days of prayer and fasting sort of thing. You would have seen things like this before. And we made a decision, rather than just to post the same image on every social media channel, that we would change the style of communication or the visuals to suit that kind of environment. So Instagram, we pretty much worked out through some testing that people engage more with a picture that doesn't have so much text or clutter or logos and things like that on. So perhaps Instagram was mostly about the beautiful visual and then mainly about the content written underneath. Whereas stories, people kind of flick through them a bit more. It's a bit more casual text, and you've seen those animated GIFs that you can use on stories now, and emojis, and all sorts of weird filters and stuff. All of that thing is completely acceptable when you're on Instagram stories. It's amazing. Facebook posts, there's a lot more scope on there for people to read long paragraphs of text. And of course, Facebook can use hyperlinks, and you can link to websites and things through Facebook, so that might be the main way you do it. And of course, many different places as well, slides or headers if you're using them on websites or inside meetings and things like that. So to keep track of everything that you're doing, you can use some of the inbuilt software. And again, I think it was in Jeevan's session this morning, he talked about being really diligent with the way that you're communicating. How do you actually know if your social media is working? The only way to know is to look underneath the bonnet of everything that's happening and measure, if I put this kind of picture up, how is it going to get engaged with? If I put this content up, how it's going to be engaged with. So you can do it project by project, or you could do it image by image, but the key, I guess, is just to experiment with this a lot and find out. You don't have to pay a lot of money to get this kind of information. You can do it even right now from within your Instagram app. You can see the top posts. You can look at, even on Instagram stories, whether people have swiped away within a couple of seconds, or whether people hover on your picture and look at it for a long time. So if you were to be quite strategic about your social media and release things bit by bit, look at what's working and look at the kind of content that people are engaging with, and it should give you a really good idea about whether your social media is being effective or not. One of the things we do in our church is we ask visitors to church to write down how they heard about our service. And it's a great way for us to realize that a lot of people come to church through our social media. And you can even look kind of campaign by campaign whether something brought in more people than another time. But it's a really great way to measure it all the way through. Your goal through social media might not be more people to church. It might be more people on your email subscription list. It might be more people who are buying a product, or a whole number of reasons or goals that you might have. So measure those things, put something out, and then try and measure it and make sure that you're actually looking at whether it's being effective or not. Call to actions, I guess, are also really important, making sure you've got a very clear call to action for any post that you're putting out there for people. Let's move on to this other really easy key for you to implement, which is storytelling. Behind every effective communication, I believe there's some kind of story that's being told, even if it's the story of your solution communicating to that person's pain point. There is a story that's kind of communicating with your audience. Remember, you're building a relationship through social media. You could change maybe 50% of the posts that you put out through your social media. You could put them under kind of a banner of storytelling. I'll give you an example, perhaps that you're going to do a drive to get more people into small groups in your church. And the traditional way of bringing people into small groups is, like we said earlier on, to promote at them. Please come to small groups. This Wednesday night, 10 p.m., here are the locations, is a typical example of maybe a promotional post. But then flip it over to storytelling. Storytelling can be very powerful, and the power of people's testimony to give, again, a personal look is what people are searching for, an authentic experience about what's happening behind the scenes. And you could put out a Connect group post that is all about someone's experience of a small group. So, for example, I joined church on this date, but then I went along to a small group, and it had this impact in my life. And since going to a small group, I've realized these benefits have come to my life through that small group. Now, at the end of it, it's your choice whether you put a call to action or not. Most of the time, I'd say that it doesn't even need it, because the story is so clear about what it's pointing people towards. A story is powerful enough to actually influence people to tell them that small groups are a really big deal. It's a very easy way for you to start talking about stories. You can communicate stories through writing, in your captions. You can do interviews with people. You can take a photo and a portrait and kind of give a biography of someone. You can give a story about someone who's used your product. Here's a couple of ways, though, for you to know whether that story is really going to become effective. Let's say that you're creating a video interview with someone. You can use these kind of keys to know whether that story is kind of detailed enough. First of all, is it simple? Can someone understand that this whole video is about cell groups? Is it relatable? Is the person who's speaking a relatable person? Is the whole idea of it familiar? Is the experience that they have about feeling lonely, is it familiar to the people in your target audience? Immersion, can I picture the story? You could cut away to some other shots of small group coming together and eating food and smiling and, hugging and all those kind of things. And drama, is there any drama in the story to make them feel emotion? I guess, and lastly, trust in the teller. Is it obvious that this person is trying to promote something or change or manipulate my behavior, or are they just giving me the story and allowing me to do what I want with it? So trust is really important. Storytelling is a really easy way for you to simply change what you're doing with social media. 2 examples there, I think, that you could check out maybe after this session. A great big story, 60-second docs. Check out the way that in 60 seconds they can kind of push people towards a product or a way of thinking. Check those out. I think they're really powerful ways of engaging people. And you notice that both of them have a couple of 100,000 followers because people love to hear people's stories. It's one of the things we do as humans. We sit down, share stories with each other. We can do the same thing through social media. Keep social media social. Seems really obvious, but half of social media is social media. It's supposed to be interactive. You want to have ways that you can communicate with people, get likes from people, get replies from people. A really simple way that you could do this, again, just change half of your posts to start off with a question. You could, rather than telling people a statement, you could start off with words like should or would or which or who or where or why. Instagram stories have things like polls that you can use to get interaction from people. So for example, do you prefer char kway teow or do you prefer nasi lemak? And 100% of people say char kway teow. Nasi lemak's horrible, but char kway teow is the food of heaven. Everybody loves it. You get interaction from people, and it keeps you having a conversation with the people on the other side. You can even do sliders now. Has anyone seen the sliders that you can do? How much do you love char kway teow? 100%. And interact with people like that. Just make sure that if you are going to ask for people's responses or replies, that you are responding quickly. Because again, there's nothing worse than just a blank reply where no one's responding. Some tips on kind of creating content that's social. You could, of course, go for quality content. People are more likely to share something if it looks beautiful, it's been well designed, and there's been some time and effort put into content. You could think about whether there's a reward for someone to repost something. If you're trying to get an image or something to go viral, think about what kind of incentive you could give someone. Influencers as well, people who are influential, they don't have to be trying to do this for money through Instagram, but they could just be people who you respect, and you know that people respect it in your field. Could they post something and help you to extend your reach? A great way, if you are in a church environment, is to resource your team with content that they can share through social media. Because it's one thing to see stuff happening on someone's official Instagram account, a church or an organization, but it's really powerful if you see the same thing popping up on people's actual feeds. We found that people are so precious about what they post on things like Instagram and Facebook that they don't want to post adverts on there. So I don't know, perhaps give them either stuff that looks very beautiful and very subtle, or give them things for Instagram stories, which is kind of like the messy place of social media. Who cares what's on there? No one seems to mind. It only lasts for 24 hours anyway. One last thing before we just do a quick summary and maybe ask for a couple of questions. You can use the news, you can use current events and things to make sure that your content that you're producing through your channel is in touch with the real world and with real events that are happening. And I know a lot of you would have done this already. The benefits of doing this is it makes you a relevant current voice. And I believe every single one of you have great things to say about current events, even perhaps when terrible current events happen, natural disasters and things. You can show your support. You can kind of lead people or influence people about how we respond to things like that through the way that you post through social media. A couple of fun examples of current events. This one is a famous one from a couple of years back. I believe it was in the Super Bowl in America, that image on the top left of the screen. And the electricity or the power or something went out during the event, and it was in complete darkness. And so very cleverly, the whole of America is watching this awful thing happening, and Oreo got the designer somehow, like whatever time it was at night, to make up an image, and there was their post on Twitter, "You can still dunk in the dark," it says. And of course, so many people shared it and reposted it because it was so humorous and so witty. I think that second one there is from this church here, HTBB. And in public holidays, simply just posting something, celebrating what's happening around is a really easy thing to do. Celebrations like the Southeast Asia Games, McDonald's created all their content to kind of be relevant to that time. Natural disasters and tensions, too, is a great way for you to get involved with that. So just a bit of a summary of what we talked about. Of course, going way back to the beginning, the simple stuff, defining the audience of who you're trying to communicate through with social media. I really cannot stress how important I believe that point is for everything else. If you can really spend some time drilling down on who it is you're trying to communicate to, I think it'll change the way that you communicate everything. It'll give you clarity, it'll give you focus, and then once you've done that, you can then aim to engage those people. So don't just upload the poster for your event on Instagram hoping that it'll work. Create some content specifically for those social media channels. Again, each social media channel has a different use and a different tone, a different ideal frequency. To keep things consistent, there's nothing worse than outdated social media presence. It gives a really bad image. So if you're going to do it, commit to maybe doing 2 posts a week or 1 post every day, whatever you think it is that your team can cope with. Work from content plans will really help you with that. Storytelling is a really easy way to enhance communication. You could just change 50% of what you do to stories, and I guarantee it'll have a lot more engagement with people. Interact with people, create content that they'll share, and they'll comment on and like and interact with, and staying connected as well to current events, I think is really important. Okay, we're going to leave it there, and maybe I'll ask Aaron maybe just a couple of summary questions or something that can help clarify us for the last 5 minutes. Is that all right? So anything that's popped up in your thinking, anything you want to share, observations about social media?
Hi, I just wanted to know if you see a role of paid digital marketing in ministry settings, in a church, or in any of the ministries that anyone here might be involved in?
Sure. So I think you're talking about like an influencer or someone.
No, not influencer. I think more like paid Instagram advertising, for example, or
Okay.
Facebook advertising.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because we were talking about that just before the session down here with these guys. We've certainly done Facebook boosting and promotions and things like that in the past. I don't know if it had any impact, and I don't know whether that was because, again, we hadn't really thought about the kind of quality of content that we were putting out, but I would certainly use it. I think it seems very affordable, and if you're going to spend maybe like 500 ringgit getting some flyers printed, you could at least spend 50 ringgit on trying to multiply some posts to reach more people. But again, I think there's no point trying to multiply a post that is not actually going to engage with people. If it's just a promotion, then people will see it and they'll scroll straight past it and you'll waste your money. So I think that's why going back to that first thing there is really important about defining the audience and creating content that's going to really engage with them. Earlier on this morning, we talked about testing whether that actually works before you overly invest as well. It's probably a great idea to test it without any paid advertising and see how people comment with it. And if something really works, a specific campaign or a photo, then yeah, I think go for it and let's use these channels as we can. You do have to remember, though, that if someone sees the word promoted, it instantly pulls away the authenticity of the post just bubbling up. Some people are kind of opposed to it. I don't know what you guys think, but personally, if I see the promoted thing come up, I want to like report it, get it off my feed. I don't want to see stuff like this. So yeah, it's completely up to you.
That was amazing. Thank you, Joel. My question is, so you talked about not just promoting on your social media platforms, but engaging. What would you then recommend in terms of promoting content? Because it's such a good way to hit so many of your followers, to tell them what's going on in the church. What other ways then can you inform people?
Yeah, well promotion, you've got to have some promotion, haven't you? Otherwise, everything's just a gallery of pretty pictures and it doesn't really have an emphasis. So especially if you're trying to lead people towards weekends or certain events or to do certain actions, you're going to have some form of promotion in there. Part of it might be just making sure that it's only 1 in 5 posts, for example, that it's a promotion, and the other 4 all about telling stories and engaging and educating people. But there's clever ways you can do it too. I know here, HTBB, right, some amazing content going up just from here, from LC18, seeing some of the clear information that's put out there, which I'd call promotional content. You need to be at this place at this time. Here's the logo. Here's where you go to register. And then mix that up with a whole load of other inspiration. So it's just packaged together. You can use different social media accounts. You can use things like the sliding function, the carousel function on Instagram, to maybe put 3 inspirational posts followed by a promotion at the end. Perhaps Instagram stories, you could have 3 or 4 posts that work in sequence. The first one's a promotion, followed by 3 videos that engage people. So you're kind of wrapping promotion up with inspirational posts as well. And I think that makes sure that people stay engaged with it. Next question. Oh, sorry, it's all down the front. You have to run, Aaron. Come on, man, work off that lunch.
My question is, how do you manage old people versus young people? And old people were very nervous about this stuff. We're scared of the casual messages.
Yeah.
I want to put real handcuffs on anybody that touches any of our social media because I'm very scared of it. You know, how do you suggest that older owners, managers, and bosses handle the reality of social media?
So you're probably talking about you trying to get a team of people to help you out with social media, is that right? You're just scared of it. Well, you definitely need some people who are very competent in it and around you to help you with it. I think there's got to be a certain amount of trust in some of the younger guys who are so tech savvy. They're using this all the time. I think a lot of the things we talk about today to maybe people even 10 years younger than me would just come so naturally because they've grown up with this just being their whole world. They post and they comment and they have friendships. And some people reckon that friendships in real life are breaking down because people are turning more and more to social media. It obviously has negative effects too, but these young guys are so switched on when it comes to technology. So at the end of the day, if you're the leader of the organization, though, you still want your message to come through. Probably for people who aren't the leader of the organization, you need to go up and speak to older people or people who are leading the organization and ask them questions about who it is that we're trying to reach. And maybe that's more of your role, is kind of like a guidance. This is our target audience. These are the people who we're trying to reach. And then within those boundaries, allow the younger guys to create content. Feedback to do with social media checking off designs and spelling mistakes. Anyone seen stuff go out and then thought, no, like you spelt that completely wrong. You're not checking this stuff. I guess that's also important as well, to have a really good oversight of social media. So if you can create a system where it happens, designs are being produced and they get checked off and signed off. That Google Sheet's a great example. Just a column and a tick. Tick means that it's been approved to post and someone can put it up. And then really you're giving them a certain amount of control, but it's very measured.
Okay, one last question.
Do you or anyone here knows how the algorithm works in Facebook, for example? Because not every post that I may post or someone else may post would get, seen as coming forward in the feed. And I know that sometimes if I were to post a picture, then it may hit people more, especially if it's a picture of my parents or my relationship, then I notice that it keeps popping up. But if I have transported a post from Twitter or something like that, it doesn't really come up, the feed. So is there somewhere where I can find out the algorithm and how it works?
Yeah, the thing about the algorithms, other people might know more about this technical stuff than me, but the algorithms change all the time, is what I'm finding. And I'm finding for Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, for them to try and stay current, they're changing the way that things happen almost on a weekly basis. They're experimenting with new ways. So I've had an email through last week, I think, telling me that the Instagram algorithm has changed again, so that it's no longer, when we first started out in Instagram, it was done by time. So the most recent post would appear at the top. And then it changed. Your post might not be seen for 3 days, and suddenly a post pops up from 5 days ago, and where did this come from? Like at the top of your feed. It's changing all the time. So I'm not sure whether you can trust necessarily that someone says this is how it works and this is what will work. I think it goes back for us for testing. Try it and see if it does work. People do say things like photos with faces are so-and-so % more likely to, be engaged with. But if you can build a basic relationship with people, you can keep the follower count increasing, make sure that it's being engaged with, not simply you're putting out media that no one's talking to. Be really careful with the content. I think naturally your social media account will begin to rise and more people will get it. It will gain momentum behind it. And so the algorithm, hopefully from Facebook or Instagram, is supporting you creating quality content. I'm sure other people will be able to help with that. And Google as well. How does it work? The latest. It's what I would do.
On that note, can we show our appreciation to Pastor Joel?
Hey, thank you.
Thank you so much. So good.
Good fun.